You know what time it is. Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! We're back! I gotta remember to put my tongue down when I sing. Hi y'all, welcome to Storytime with Chris. Like I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max relax and chillaxing time, in between time, mean time, scheme time, study time, break time, CP time, in between time, anytime that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. Hi y'all, welcome back. And no, I don't own the music that you are listening to in the background, which is by the Buddha Lounge, a new YouTuber who does ambient music. Because the ambiance is what is key to us getting involved in the world that we're reading. For me, and this is, I'm not paid to say this, but like there's a company called Graphic Audio, and their tagline is that they make dramatized, full-length, full-cast audiobooks with like cinematic sound quality and music and sound effects, and they're like graphic audio, a movie in your mind. And that is what reading is to me, and I've always felt that way at very young as a child, because graphic audio wasn't a thing until like I got to college. So when I was a kid, even listening to audiobooks or getting involved with reading at a very young age. When I would read a novel, I would give the characters distinctive voices and mannerisms and try to visualize them in my head as I'm reading, as they're being described to me in the best way. And it does feel like it's a movie in your mind, because you get to cast the characters, you get to give them voices and color and beauty to themselves. And I think it's magical. It's a magical quality that people tend to forget about reading, but that's why I'm here, to remind you. Now, let's go ahead and begin. This Prince Jen is in a bit of a pickle, and y'all, we're almost done with the remarkable journey of Prince Jen, and I will continue to say this novel, I didn't read this until I was in middle school, and I have not looked back since. This book is amazing, and it will forever be on my favorite books of all time list. It's probably in the top 3. Number 1 favorite novel of all time is The Never-Ending Story by Michael Ende. And we've read that for story time from start to finish. And I love that story. I love what it represents for imagination, for creativity, for connectivity of people, and how our story is being told and read by others who are also having their story being told and read by others. So we're all connected. It's very beautiful. At least I think so. Now, Chapter 25. Jen contemplates a situation. Interesting device. War against Master Kengu. Master Hu had once remarked that everything was interesting if looked at carefully. Jen applied this observation to his present circumstances. First, he put Chai Sang out of his thoughts. He admitted that he had not entirely behaved with the dignity and noble fortitude Master Hu would have liked. In fact, when the administrator of benevolent correction bolted and sealed the wooden collar, Jen was raging and kicking and had to be held down. Said stumbling through the streets, goaded past the outskirts of town, he gladly took refuge in the empty countryside. He hoped somehow to meet Master Chu. The old beggar might be hiding in the underbrush waiting for a safe moment to appear. This did not happen. Jen therefore set about finding a way to free himself and to calmly analyze what he had to deal with. Master Hu, well, I guess the proper pronunciation, H-U, Hu, Y-U would be you, Hu, Master Hu, and Master Chu, and Master Shu, and Master Wu. There we go. Hu. Master Hu had been correct. Considered as object, aside from being fastened around his neck, the Kengu in its own way was interesting. At first glance, it was only a simple piece of wood with a hole in it. On one side, hinges allowed the device to swing open like jaws and then snap shut around the victim's neck. But as he discovered, it was heavy. The muscles of his shoulders already ached a little. The weight of the kangaroo slowed his steps and caused him to walk with a stoop. This posture strained his back and tired his legs. If he tried to walk quickly, his breath grew shallow and labored. When he sat down to rest, if he bowed his head, the collar pressed against his upper legs. To lie flat was difficult, for his neck was forced to bend awkwardly. It was interesting that a mere plank could be so uncomfortable. Its size and proportions were also interesting. The collar was quite wide. His arms, no matter how he stretched them, could not encompass it. His hands could not touch his head. His mouth lay beyond the reach of his fingers. He put aside the problem of how to feed himself. He had, in any case, nothing to eat. He turned his attention to breaking free. Master Hu had always urged him in his studies to go to the heart of the problem. Here, the heart of the problem was a thick iron rod. Clamped on the unhinged edge of the collar, it served as a bolt to keep the device firmly closed. If he could pry loose this bolt or somehow shatter it, the collar would swing open. How to accomplish this would require careful analysis. Master Kangu, Jen said, whoever devised you did it cleverly and neatly. He had once held a conversation with his belly, so it seemed not too extraordinary to hold a conversation with a piece of wood. To undo you, I must be equally clever. The kangaroo did not answer. Very well, Jen said. To business. Thus began his war with the kangaroo. He scuffed through dry leaves. His foot soon struck what he wanted. A rock large enough to serve his purpose, but not so heavy that he could not handle it. He knelt and groped to pry it from the frozen ground. He had to apply some effort, but at least it came out like a loose tooth. He hefted it, satisfied. With all his might, he struck at the bolt. The rock glanced off the bar. Unable to see his target, he had not struck it squarely. He recalculated and hammered at the bolt again. The iron rang dully. The impact of the bar jarred his head and neck. He continued, nevertheless. He heard a crack. Something had broken. It was not the bolt. The rock had split in his hand. He threw the fragments aside. You are stubborn, he said. The kangaroo said nothing. It took him some time to find another suitable hammer. He set about pounding at the bolt again. With the weight of the kangaroo and the difficulty of striking at something he could not see, he was quickly out of breath, sweating despite the cold. His arm grew weary. His muscles lost their strength. He understood the kangaroo, in its own sly way, was trying to exhaust him. He could not allow that. He sat on the ground until his strength came back. He began again. Sometimes he struck heavy blows. Sometimes he tapped and chipped at the bolt. He believed that if he hit it at the proper angle, he would find its weak spot. His persistence was rewarded. Another blow and the iron rod dropped to his feet. Jin gave a cry of triumph. The kangaroo did not open. This puzzled him. Then, from the corner of his eye, he glimpsed what he had overlooked. The kangaroo was cleverer than he had supposed. There were 2 more iron rods. They were affixed to the front of the collar on either side of the hole. He could not reach them. He forced himself to stay calm. The kangaroo had lured him into believing it was a simple matter of breaking a single bolt. He had worn himself out uselessly. He would have to reconsider his situation. He clung to reason and logic. He could not break all the bolts, therefore he must break the collar. He set off through the woodlands, casting around until he saw what it required. 2 trees had grown close together, the slender trunks nearly touching. There was room enough. He could wedge the kangaroo between them. If he applied enough force, the collar would split. Accordingly, his thrust one side of the kangaroo into the angle where the trunks nearly joined. He twisted back and forth and pressed all his weight against the collar. The kangaroo did not yield. He fell back, gasping from his exertions. His strength was working against itself. His neck would snap instead of the collar. He began to tremble. His head spun. His thoughts tumbled over each other. Throwing aside reason and logic, he desperately battered the kangaroo against the trees. He stumbled back and ran headlong, plunging between the forking trees. He cried out in pain as the kangaroo bit into his collarbone and wrenched his shoulder. Somewhere in his mind, a frightened animal began to scurry back and forth. Its name was Panic. He threw himself blindly against the tree trunks until his whole body screamed with pain. He seized the edges of the kangaroo. By sheer strength, he tried to rip the thing from his neck. The kangaroo tore his skin and turned it to slippery with blood. For the first time, he had to consider the one possibility he had refused to admit, that he could not free himself. Little by little, the full horror of his plight dawned on him. It was as if the kangaroo had foreseen his effort and had known in advance each attempt he would make. It had patiently waited, allowing him to match wits and strength against it, to fling himself back and forth, to roll on the ground, twisting and turning, and it was still there. The kangaroo had been silent, as though observing Jen's struggles with amusement. Now it spoke close to his ear. Do you not suppose every prisoner has done likewise? How foolish to think you might succeed where others failed. Understand one thing. There is no escape from me. I am Master Kangaroo. The kangaroo said no more. If it did, Jen did not hear. He had thrown back his head and was howling like a wolf. What hope is left? In the grip of the kangaroo, what can Jen do? Is there any possibility of ridding himself of this monstrous device? These questions, as well as other matters, are taken up in the next chapter. And that is where we will end for today. Thank you all for your patience. I really appreciate you all joining me. Like I said, you never have to watch these videos when they go live. They are here for your leisurely pleasure, okay? Now, I'm going to go switch gears because I got to get ready to read for story time on Instagram. But I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.